Waking up from Jehovah's Witnesses can be a terrifying ordeal. It can be exponentially more so if you happen to be married at the time. How will your spouse view and treat you? Will they wake up with you? Will you have to perhaps wait years for that to happen, knowing that it might not ever happen? Contemplating the end of your faith system, followed by shunning and then by the potential loss of your spouse, can leave you in a panic with no idea of what to do. This happened to be my case when I woke up. I was married at the time and had all these questions flood through my mind. Now, I won't get into details as to what happened in my personal relationships between my wife and others, but sadly, my marriage didn't survive the wake-up. As you can imagine, this happens all too often in relationships with witnesses where only one spouse wakes up. There are many reasons for this. The sad reality is that being married to a witness when you aren't one, especially if you're a former believer who is disassociated or disfellowshipped, has some major consequences and side effects. In one scenario, you may be married to a staunch witness who now views you as a spiritual danger. This may cause them to separate from you, claiming that you're going to tear them away from Jehovah and his organization. In another scenario, they perhaps still want to stay in the marriage, but you may be constantly bombarded by the JW propaganda, be mistreated or viewed differently because you supposedly aren't the same good person they used to know. They may try to place restrictions on what you can do, such as who you can be friends with, ban your friends from coming to hang out at your home, perhaps what movies you can watch, not allowing you to speak to other former members for support, not allowing you to continue your own research about the organization. All things that would essentially be called persecution if you were to try to dictate their lives in this manner. Your relationship may turn into what is essentially a roommate arrangement, since you can no longer share the same social lives and interests. Or if you're lucky, your spouse may be able to look beyond your exit, still realize that you're a good person, dedicated to your relationship, and is willing to lighten up on the social restrictions and the demanding schedule set for them by the governing body. They may understand that there are issues, but their fear just keeps them from taking that next step. In a situation like that, it may be relatively easy to continue building upon the new dynamics of your relationship and not have it crumble down in front of you. In either of the previous undesirable cases, it can cause you a great amount of stress trying to figure out what to do and try to envision what the future holds out for you. I've talked to a decent amount of people wrestling with this decision, and in the end, you just need to be honest with yourself and understanding the realities of the situation and what you're willing to live with. Since my exit, I've shared this list with quite a few people, and it's helped some make a decision one way or the other. Some have even put the list in their own words and then presented the issues to their spouse to help them see the need for adjustment, or to at least highlight the issues of staying together if no changes can be made. So here are some of the points that you may want to consider. Number 1. Your spouse essentially agrees with the governing body that you are a mentally diseased liar who deserves to be shunned by everyone you've ever known in your life, that you deserve a death sentence from God, and they basically worship the very men whom God will send to execute you. They must agree every time it comes up at a meeting that people like you, as a former member, are dangerous liars who deserve the previously mentioned penalties. They may even be the ones making the comment at the meeting. That is an incredibly difficult realization to have, and then make the decision of, do I want to spend the rest of my life with a person that views me this way? Now, this may be something that they don't actually voice to you out loud, and perhaps they haven't actually considered that reality and don't genuinely view you that way. Perhaps they just view you as misguided, and they have to deal with the cognitive dissonance that occurs from knowing how the governing body teaches them to view former members versus how they really feel about you. But it is something to keep in mind. Number 2. You likely can't have any real conversations. JW life is totally centered around the religion and what the governing body does and teaches. You can't have conversations about political views, social issues, goals in life, etc. They will all be prohibited by the JW rules, or a JW has no interest in them because God is just going to magically fix everything in the end. In the meantime, you're there watching the world pass you by, perhaps wanting to get involved to help make the world a better place, to ensure human rights, to help correct injustices, to help solve our social issues, to help reduce pollution, and so on and so forth. That in itself could be a torture to your soul, knowing that you could do something to help, but you would be alone in doing so. Number 3, if you're married to a staunch witness, then you'll never have any social life together or the same friends. This creates a host of problems. Your spouse is friends with a group of people, your former friends, that actively shun you for having a conscience. Your spouse will likely be envious and suspicious of your new friend group, yet will never meet them due to their fear of worldly association. You'll have to explain to your new friends why they've never met your spouse, and there's almost no way of doing so in a positive light. It will sound ludicrous to any sane person unless they happen to have experience in a cult or a high-control group themselves. Your spouse will likely constantly wonder if you're having an affair, be it physical or emotional. Now, imagine the reality of this situation. You have this massive hole in your relationship with your spouse. You can't be genuine with each other, can't share meaningful conversation about topics that they disagree with or aren't allowed to discuss. You're married to someone who agrees that you deserve to die and should be shunned. And you can't do anything together unless you're essentially alone. What's going to happen when, in your new friend group, you meet someone with whom you can share all those things, who maybe you are attracted to, and it seems that they're into you as well, and they're available? It's a recipe for disaster, and it's only a matter of time before something happens. Or at least it could send you into a cycle of depression, regret, and resentment, knowing what you could have if only you weren't still shackled in some way to the JW religion. Number 4. If you've discussed with your spouse the problems with disfellowshipping, the blood policy, and the hiding of child abuse, you'll have to battle with the fact that your spouse knowingly approves of the organization that participates in these things and then goes out preaching, telling other people how wrong their religion is, and again, labels you as part of the Antichrist for not going along with it. Can your morality and conscience put up with living with someone who approves of such things? Number 5. Every day you spend in that scenario is a day you'll never get back. Every day is wasted. There's likely someone else out there with whom you can share those things. Once you piece all that together, it becomes soul-crushing knowing that that potential future is out there and you're letting it drift away. At that point, it just becomes a matter of, do I have the courage to do it? And how long is it going to take? When you've reached that point, you'll know. It's horrible, but if you do come to that conclusion, you'll both be better off in the end. You can be who you truly are without having the remnants of JW life still weighing you down, and they can live their life as they wish as a devoted witness in obedience to the governing body. Now, in no way am I trying to encourage anyone to separate from their spouse if they don't wake up with them. In fact, I would try to encourage the opposite if their circumstances allow it and they can be happy with that decision. I know some who have made it work and have a great relationship. Some who stayed together but essentially have separate lives and can never thrive, and others who divorced. Some of the saddest cases are those who stayed in the relationship for many years, hoping for change, only for it to never happen. Their fear of what their spouse would do kept them from taking a full stand against the corruption of the organization. Or, as previously mentioned, they took a stand and had a relationship that left them feeling empty and lonely. Then, after maybe 8 or 10 years, their marriage is finally falling apart, and they're coming to terms with the fact that they wasted a decade of their life with someone who prefers a group of men in New York over their own spouse. That kind of regret and loss is something very difficult to come to terms with. All of this can be even more complicated if children are involved. You'll have to decide what option is going to be better for the physical and emotional safety of your children. This may mean that you choose to stay in the home to ensure you have constant contact with your children to serve as a barrier to that indoctrination. Or perhaps you can still get out on your own, living as close as possible so that in a joint custody arrangement, you can still be there to provide similar protection. While that situation perhaps gives you less consecutive time with your children, that also has major benefits. Handling that situation is a whole other topic on its own, and I plan on addressing that sometime in another video as well. Of course, the eventual goal is the hope that at some point your children will choose to not get baptized and link themselves forever to the religion with the severe consequences that come from it. But even if they do, you can be there to assure them that you'll always be there for them and will love them regardless of their belief system. Before moving on from that topic of family, whether or not you have children, counseling is something that can and should be considered and may very likely be necessary. A therapist may be able to help you navigate your new situation with your spouse and children in a constructive way to avoid the pitfalls that come from a mixed faith relationship, especially when one or more are involved in a religion as damaging and controlling as Jehovah's Witnesses. Of course, it can be a difficult task to get a witness to attend a session with a therapist. Most witnesses have a fear of secular counseling and therapy due to the years of negative propaganda pushed about by both the organization and its members. The idea is generally present in their minds that they will blame the religion for their problems and then try to lead you away from the faith. So it may take some research and tact on your part to inform them on what actually happens and how it works. I know that another factor in this could be fear. The fear of having to go out and find other friends, fear of dating again, or just the fear of starting over. You may struggle with self-esteem, wondering if you can even make friends again, thinking they'll wonder why you don't have any close friends as an adult. You may think that at your age you won't be able to find another person to share your life with, thinking that no one will want you, or that they're all taken, or that anyone else still single out there probably has issues or baggage. I know what that feels like, as I was there and I struggled with the same thoughts. But remember, so much of what we think of the world around us was molded by a high control group that poisoned our view. There are plenty of great people out there. People who chose to not get married at a super young age. People that never married for any number of reasons and don't necessarily have any baggage that keeps them single. It's a choice they can make if their life isn't strictly controlled by a group of men, as ours was. There are plenty of ways to build new relationships, and technology has provided a few new avenues. Don't be afraid to get out there and do it. But be realistic and remember that it's going to take some effort and bravery on your part. If that fear is what's keeping you back, then keep in mind this quote I heard a while back. To try and fail is at least to learn. To fail to try is to suffer the inestimable loss of what might have been. When it comes to telling others about your experience, don't be afraid to do so. Now, I'd likely not make that the first thing that I tell someone, but if it comes up organically, don't get shy or nervous about it. Our story of exiting JWs can be fascinating to those who were never part of it. Tell it. Laugh about it. Show that you've moved on and you've grown as a person. All of that considered, there are a lot of factors at play here. It may be that you don't have these issues in your relationship and you're with someone who isn't an overachieving witness. Or perhaps you've seen some cracks in their belief system and there's perhaps a chance of them waking up. It could be that you're a bit on the introverted side and you might even prefer just being alone with your spouse and the idea of meeting new people just might not interest you. Remember that just about anything can happen with time, if you have the time and the patience to wait it out and be prepared for the possibility of them never changing. As an example, a friend of mine who was also a former elder had woken up and disassociated when he learned the truth about the religion. His wife stayed in for a while after that, but his wife ended up waking up herself due to hearing the negative gossip that was spread about him that she knew wasn't true. So, you never know what can happen, especially if you and your spouse truly love each other and have a great relationship, even with the religious divide. Of course, all of this assumes you're in a safe place and can ensure that you're safe from abuse, both mental and physical, have a steady income, and a roof over your head. If you don't have that, then perhaps you can start making long-term plans to ensure that you do have those things and can escape safely and successfully at some point in the future. In the end, you'll have to weigh all of that together. For any of you in this position, I hope things can work out for you to salvage your relationship. In either case, hopefully this can at least help a bit in making that decision. Take care of yourself, and see you next time.